This is CareShift with me, Safik Bilikanti, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Ardy Arianpour, founder and CEO of Seekster. Seekster is revolutionizing healthcare by building a patient-centric operating system that connects, cleanses, and transforms fragmented longitudinal health records, pulling together EHRs, genomics, DNA profiles, wearable device data, and more into a unified interoperable platform that breaks down data silos and puts patients in control of their health information. From enabling seamless real-time access and data sharing to powering AI-driven insights, real-world evidence generation, faster clinical trial recruitment, and improved care coordination, Seekster removes the friction of scattered health data so patients, providers, researchers, and life science teams can focus on better outcomes instead of chasing records. Founded in 2016, Seekster has raised approximately $16 million in venture funding backed by leading investors including Omni Health Holdings LLC, Takeda, and much more. Ardy was such an amazing guest, and I truly learned so much. Ardy, it's amazing to have you on today, so thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much, Vic. Excited to be here on your amazing podcast.
Thanks, man. I appreciate this. So, going into this, there's a lot of things in AI right now with data moat as a big kind of concept now where, especially in healthcare, as I mentioned, if you have specific data from one healthcare institution versus a public location, it's much more better when it comes to credibility and trust. But we also see, fragmented health data as a big blocker in the life sciences and precision medicine, things like that. Why is now like the perfect moment for like patient-centric interoperability? And is that pretty much going to become a category winner in your sense? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, this is such a great question. When I founded the company Seekster 10 years ago in 2016, we thought that it was going to be a big thing then, but we were just so far ahead of our time being visionaries in this space that I think we got started way too early in hindsight. But really, it was actually the best timing. And the reason being is because these things that are very difficult, these are complex problems. Interoperability is probably the most complex problem in all of healthcare. It's not like some triage thing. It's not some admin thing. It's not some, scribing thing. Not that those problems aren't hard in healthcare, but interoperability is the underlying disease for all disease in all of healthcare, right? And it relates to infinite amount of use cases, and it relates to every single kind of disease that you can think of, right? Not just for the patients, but also it's a problem for the hospitals themselves, the innovators themselves, the physicians that are giving the care and prescribing the meds and all that good stuff. But I think now that we can fast forward having 10 plus years of experience in this field and being an innovator within patient-centric interoperability, it is not just going in that direction. There's no other direction for it to go to. And I think there's a couple things that have had a tailwind, I think, for us that's made the case so strong now today. One is COVID obviously happened like in 2020-ish, and that allowed, new technologies to really show their skill sets, right? And then a second thing is, of course, AI right after COVID, right? These two things are two of the largest, I think, moments in just technology in general. And one had to do with a major pandemic and disease that opened up so many other avenues and opportunities. And then the second is AI. I mean, nothing's bigger than AI. You can't go around every day talking about AI, even if you wanted to.
And how does that kind of work in your end, specifically at Seekster? How are you guys kind of joining or making kind of data, I guess, data less fragmented and doing that in a daily basis for your customers overall?
Yeah. So look, Seekster is a leading healthcare technology company. We basically connect, collect, and refine patient consented data, health data, across care settings into a longitudinal patient view. We have 150 million plus patients in our regulatory grade platform, and life science companies can accelerate research. AI developers can train higher models from the quality data that we have. And then patients can also gain a meaningful insight into better managing their health. And it's all from consented, standardized health data. When we founded the company in 2016, our whole thing was how do we actually put the patient at the center of healthcare to disrupt all this data silo, bringing together the episodic data, their baseline genetic data, their wearable data, their medical device data, and create this longitudinal health record. And that's what we've done over the past decade. And of course, we have to thank our amazing investors that believed in our vision, that backed this company, number one. Number two, our incredible customers. And we're working with some of the largest healthcare and life science organizations globally, actually.
So, you mentioned you guys work with patients and these life science institutions. How does it kind of work on that patient side? How do you guys recruit or find patients that can work and kind of be tailored for the life science institutions that you're working with or based on what they're looking for? Like, how are you guys able to find patients in both ways?
So if we're working with a pharma sponsor, then they have their own recruitment methods where they're finding patients, or maybe they already have certain patients, right? And we help with that process. We built an operating system. The Seekster operating system gets deployed as a white label for that pharma sponsor or that CRO if we're working with a contract research organization. And then our technology really does the magic. And what's amazing about it is there's no IT lift, right?
Mm.
That's what's key. A lot of these larger organizations want the simplest, most easiest process for their clinical trial, for their patient recruitment, for their patient engagement. Whatever that use case may be, that's where Seekster gets sits in. And, all we do is we seek out health data upon the request of the patient. And since we built this data foundation model over the past decade and infrastructure, it's very easy for us to put up an instance, stand up their, use case that's specific to their, initiative, whether that be oncology, rare disease, autoimmune, longevity, it doesn't matter to us, right? Interoperability is such a big problem, like I mentioned. It doesn't matter if the caregiver is trying to grab the data or the patient's trying to share their data or the researcher per the consent of the patient is trying to, see that longitudinal health record on that specific individual. That's what our expertise is in, and that's what our platform actually delivers.
So how are customers currently using you guys to the most effect? And, I recently saw, I think it was, this is a while back, I saw Eric Topol kind of mention you guys on X, Twitter. I think it was like weeks or months ago. And I guess it kind of makes sense how he's using it, but how are others using it and like maybe how he's using it overall? Like what is the biggest benefit of using you guys? And, what is this ROI for them overall and in to get kind of going?
Yeah. So, Dr. Eric Topol's tweet was a watershed moment, actually. It was
Oh.
August of 2018 that happened. And what is that? That's 8 years ago. So you have to understand how far ahead of the curve Seekster was, where Dr. Eric Topol was the first patient, first innovator, first skeptic, right? First person to share his entire longitudinal health data, plus his genomics data, plus his MyFitnessPal data, plus his nutrition data, plus his Fitbit, even at the time when people, had Fitbits, right? When they were called Fitbits prior to Google buying them. This was a watershed moment, not just for interoperability, for all of healthcare, for all of life sciences, because he was able to bring all that data together in less than 24 hours at the time. The difference between 2018 and August when he actually, tweeted that, and we had 7 million people hit our website at the time. We had to shut down our business actually because we created the first consumer EMR. And then a lot of folks found out about us, and then we pivoted to B2B2C, where we created an operating system so that, business enterprises can utilize our technology to deploy it for their patients, for their members at scale, whether that be for healthcare organizations, payers, and providers, or for life science companies, pharma companies, CROs, and so forth, biotech, etc.
So when you guys took that B2B route, what were the common obstacles you had to deal with at the beginning?
One big obstacle was time. Time kills all deals. This is what I've learned in my 25 plus years of being in digital health, healthcare, and life sciences. I have a unique background because I've been able to see everything from a 30,000-foot view, right? As well as looking at all the data in the trenches, as I call it, the data of the data elements. But the time suck that it takes to get a partner, to get a customer, to get an investor, these things take time. You have to be
Yeah.
1,000,000% dedicated for this mission, but also have a vision and have patience and understanding that, if you're going to do something that's going to solve, a big problem in healthcare, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And most entrepreneurs, most CEOs, most boards, most investors are not investing in time. They're looking for a quick win. The difference with Seekster was, myself and my other co-founders all had an exit before. And so we had the luxury, and we still have the luxury of time. We've dedicated our life to actually this company. And the reason being is because I don't think there's anything bigger that we can do. If there was, I would go do that. But I
Right.
still to this day have not found something more fulfilling that can help, so many patients, millions of patients across the globe. At the same time, help hundreds, thousands of organizations in healthcare and life sciences. And now that we have 150 million plus patients with data, we have 40 billion plus data elements
Right.
on these 150 million plus patients. And we've cleansed the data, we've standardized the data, we've harmonized the data. This is so timely with what's happening with the wave of AI, because if you don't have high quality, high fidelity data, the AI is completely worthless.
Right. I mean, kind of going into that, at first, I mean, I'm assuming back in 2016, you guys weren't a quote unquote AI first company. I mean, a lot of companies weren't. How did you guys kind of adapt to the AI wave? Did you guys have to, push anything on your product or kind of tell customers we're coming into the AI wave in a specific way? And did customers kind of talk about or ask about any AI kind of things that they wanted specifically, and how did you guys kind of implement that and kind of go based on feedback?
Yeah, so we did not start up as an AI company, right? In 2016, we started as a data company. And to this day, we still are a health technology, health data company. However, that being said, it's just the natural progressing, not even a pivot. When AI came out 3+ years ago, I had our team fully focused on AI and how we can actually bring together AI powered medical records. So we have
Right.
AI integrated on top of the medical record, right? For both the patient and for the researcher, right? And that's really powerful because you can derive so many insights without having to hire so many data scientists. What AI has done is it's made our system stronger, faster, and more valuable by 100x. And the reason being is because we spent a decade building the data foundation. If we didn't have the data foundation, the AI that we're doing wouldn't be as valuable as it is today. And that's really just because of just time, hard work, and being at the right place.
Right. And for companies, for startups starting right now, how would you advise them to take advantage of the AI kind of bubble we're in now, and how to kind of, I guess, because it's very overwhelming right now, right? Because
Yeah.
every single market 20 plus competitors. It's very hard to go with the quotes of keep your eye on exactly what you're building. There's still so much noise. How do you like recommend founders right now building to kind of say, screw that, just focus on what you're building and then just go with that and find your customers?
So my advice would be don't try to do everything under the sun. A lot of companies are failing and they're going to keep failing because they don't have a focus. If you are doing anything within healthcare, you need to be laser focused on one problem and become experts in that problem. If not, you're going to fail because there's just too many variables that come in, number one. And then I would say the second biggest thing is you have to love what you do. The passion is the key because if you don't love it, having a startup is painful. Having a startup in healthcare or life sciences, it's like eating glass. It's not
Yeah.
painful. It's just really a cruel thing to go through, right? It's not easy. The failure rate is very high. 99.9% of companies fail. And you learn as you go. There isn't an investor that can tell you what the magic is. There isn't even an entrepreneur that can really tell you what the magic is. You have to, sail uncharted waters and find that island in the middle of nowhere on your own. And sometimes you get lucky and you find it earlier than others. And sometimes you get lucky and you find it later. But as long as you survived, then you've built a thriving business and technology, and that can hit on so many different angles.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty much like survival of the fittest. If you can stay the longest, whoever stays the longest pretty much will win ultimately at the end, I feel like, and that's just kind of how it goes.
It's always like that. And I think, surviving is one thing, right? But you have to learn how to thrive.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand that because they're only focused on surviving. They're not thinking about how to thrive. And the how to go from good to great is jumping from surviving to thriving.
Right.
And
Right.
that's a mindset. It's a total mindset because you could be barely surviving. And if you can think and trick yourself into that you're thriving, amazing things are going to happen for you.
Right. When you guys started, you guys were B2C, right? And as you mentioned, now the argument is pretty much being B2C is so difficult, in healthcare. Back then, 2016, the argument could have been it's pretty, you can come into consumers. But now with everything going on, it's very hard and very overwhelming. Do you still see room for B2C companies in healthcare to thrive in this circumstance? What does that look like in the future as well?
I actually think the opposite. I think it's easier to be B2C today than it was 10 years ago. And the reason
Mm.
being is because one, there's more interest in healthcare and in health in general than ever. Look what's going on with Whoop and Aura Ring and a lot of the different just recycled technologies that are going on your wrist instead of an Apple Watch, right? I wear an Apple Watch because I like it being connected to the Apple ecosystem, but it's actually not the best wearable. There's the Whoop and Oura Ring are way better and you get way better data, right? Plus, they're not green. So I like wearing my little green band that matches my company color. So I love
Right.
the green color, right? Because health is your wealth. But I do think
Absolutely.
that it's a lot easier to start a direct to consumer business today with AI and everything that's going on because you just don't need to hire as many people to get that going.
Right, but,
However,
like, wouldn't it be harder, sorry to cut you off, I was gonna say, like, how wouldn't it be harder, though, to kind of convince somebody to go on your app? I mean, if it is an app, like, for example, if it is
I
an
see
app.
what you're saying. Yeah, I think apps are definitely not what they used to be. People aren't really using apps anymore.
Yeah.
They're not. Right?
Right.
Not like how they used to. 10 years ago, if you made an app, like people were into it. But I'm not thinking about direct to consumer with an app. Of course, you still need an app and all that good stuff. It's just one of those check marks. But just in general, direct to consumer businesses are very difficult. However, have shorter timelines in acquiring customers than B businesses because B2B businesses, the sales cycles can be 12, 24, 36 months. but you
Yeah.
can launch a direct to consumer business tomorrow and you can go to your, next door neighbor and get 5 users if you needed to. So the customer acquisition is more accessible, quicker, but scaling it is maybe a different story.
Right.
It
And
goes down to
what
marketing
kind
dollars,
of
actually.
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's definitely less, and in your case specifically, how did you guys have to distribute the B2C business overall at first? How did that go?
So when we started out direct to consumer, it was just on online, right? And it was word of mouth.
Yeah.
We were kind of in pseudo stealth. And then people found out about us. People started tweeting about us. We had a technology at a time where, innovators understood it, but the general population didn't, right? If we went direct to consumer today, would it be a different story? I think 100% it would be a different story, but you still need to, advertise and pay for the customer acquisition cost, which is a total different ball game,
Yeah.
right? Than going B2B. I think also the scale and the customer support and service side has its own issues when you're direct to consumer, especially when you're dealing with health data in general. From one person, you can get continuous questions around, their health and their health data. And that has its own, avenues of problems.
Yeah, and when you guys were kind of looking starting off at the beginning with the metrics, what were those three non-obvious metrics that you kind of had to learn since 2016 actually scaled from where you guys were at to now versus a company that has some XYZ metrics, but they're not really moving, right? What are those kind of like non-obvious metrics?
I would say one metric was just doing something that no one was actually doing, right? It's risk, right? You can't really measure risk. We got into patient-centric interoperability at a time where the 21st Century's Cures Act was coming around with ONC and CMS and everyone. And it was just so ahead of its time. It was a big risk because some people understood it, but most people didn't know what actually and why you needed a solution for interoperability, right? The second metric that's really hard to pinpoint down is product market fit. There's no metric
Mm.
really for product market fit because if Coca-Cola would have invested in us instead of Takeda, then we would have gone into maybe corporate wellness and we would have been this amazing corporate wellness platform. Takeda invested in us because they wanted a patient engagement platform. And so we fell into the life sciences world, right? And then we got into the healthcare world because of certain customers calling us because they wanted a similar solution for their members, not their patients. And then I would
Mm.
say the third big metric is probably, that you can't measure. You don't know what you don't know. You learn a lot working with small companies and large
Yeah.
companies. And we've been lucky to work with dozens of small companies and dozens of large organizations. I mean, we have some customers that are Fortune 5 organizations in the United States that are our customers. And so you learn a lot that you can apply from the small companies to the larger companies. And that's not really a metric you can actually measure. That's just experience. And that's,
Yeah.
being really focused for the problem that we are trying to solve and not saying no to a small company and not just being focused on trying to get large deals with big companies. I think they're both have their, pros and cons.
Other than sales cycles as a big common problem, obviously, for these large companies and sometimes even for the small companies, what were the big problems kind of navigating and onboarding these clients into Seekster?
I mean, every customer is different.
Mhm.
Every platform is different and their requests for onboarding are different. If we're dealing with a clinical trial onboarding, it's much different than, let's say, a patient registry. They're not the same, right? You have to, because you have the customer, which is the organization that you're dealing with. And then you have the customer's customer, which is the user, the patient, or the member, depending on the use case, depending on whether it's a healthcare company whether it's a life sciences company, whether it's some, nonprofit or foundation. There's some similarities, right? But the essence of how you're going to push certain notifications and engage that user, member, or patient does differ.
Interesting. So, you mentioned your kind of a lot of two kind of things here. One is that clinical trials, and then the patient kind of, interoperability kind of standpoint here. How bad is the problem now versus 2016 when in the fragmentation for clinical trials and
Yeah.
for the, what does it look like? Did it get worse, or is it still getting better? Or what are those problems?
Well, interoperability is like cancer, it just grows. It
Yeah.
doesn't get better, it does get worse. The problem itself, right? But there's a big but. Compared to 10 years ago, I mean, the solutions have gotten better, right? The technology has gotten better. So if an organization wants to adopt a solution for an interoperability problem within their specific use case, and let's say they want to use Seekster, of course, our solution is 10,000 times better than even when Dr. Eric Topol tried it. And it took 24 hours to bring 4 health systems, 4 different EMRs, and all this genomic data and all this other data together to create this longitudinal health record. We can do it in 24 milliseconds now. So
Yeah.
it's gotten faster, right? It's gotten, you can complete the record more, and that's something that wasn't available before. And I would also say that you've learned a lot about what wasn't possible, where you can fill gaps of care, and that's a big one.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so, I mean, but what are those problems? Is there still massive problems that are yet to be solved since the beginning of like 10 years ago? And we're still in the grind of, and this is where you guys are probably coming in, but is there any more problems out there that, it's like we need to jump into the space now before other competitors come in, or there's other people that want to, potentially work on something similar? Because even now I see a lot of companies that are working a lot in healthcare data, helping companies kind of migrate data much more efficiently. In clinical trial space specifically, we see a lot of data companies working in this. So what are those common problems that are even increasing now?
I mean, there's not that many solutions actually. The
Mm,
biggest problem still is it's really hard to do, and it's really hard to get funding to do this, right? Most
yeah,
investors don't fund this problem because you need to be able to make revenue. And so, you can have an okay solution. It doesn't mean you're going to make revenue, right? And it doesn't
right,
mean that you're going to have a thriving business unless you really are covering all angles. What we've done in the last 10 years is try to cover as many angles as we can from A to Z. And within interoperability themselves, there's so much going on where, data is being siloed constantly. Data is never going to not be siloed, right? Providers
right,
are always going to silo data. Wearable companies are always going to silo data, right? If you just take, Apple Watch and the Garmin, it's not like they talk to one another because they're two different companies and they're never going to talk to one another. So that interoperability issue on that simple problem of just two wearables is always going to exist. And so there's immense business opportunity as long as you can find the right partners, as long as you can find the right, problem. And as long as you've built a solution that fits that data scheme. In terms of data itself, I think there's more dirty data out there now today than there was even 10 years ago. And so
mm,
that's why we've focused the company now on cleansing and cleaning the data, right? And now with large language models needing to ingest cleanse data, that is actually another big solution that we have now that couldn't have been available from back in the day because it just took years for us to build a data refinery on the back end that can cleanse that data. And I would also say that, you know, there are, a handful of competitors, but even the competitors in this space don't all do the same thing because it's really hard. And each competitor has its own focus.
interesting. And was Was Seekster, when you guys first went to that B2B kind of route, I'm assuming there's really obviously nobody there in kind of that you guys had to potentially compete with. But, how did it go to get your first B2B client? What were those obstacles? Did you have to do numerous amount of cold calls, outreach? What was that process like?
I mean, it actually wasn't a lot, to be honest with you. I got up on stage, gave a talk. Next thing you knew, we had 3, 4 very large organizations that were interested. And that's because, everyone was thinking about these problems. They never actually saw a solution. And so when I demoed a solution, it was just a click where those individuals at those organizations understood, like, oh, wow, there's a solution here. And I know exactly where I can apply that. What was
Interesting.
really difficult is getting to a point on the technology to be comfortable enough to present that solution on a global stage so that people actually can see that this is not just some little demo. This is a workable deploying solution that, there's no third party software being used. We built the software from scratch. I mean, all this at Seekster was created through thin air, as I always say. So, you know, getting those customers and then delivering for that first customer was key, right? And then obviously you learned like what not to do as well, so that for that second customer, you could actually do it a little bit differently. And it's always that way, right? You learn from one customer, you learn from one experience, and you try to apply like what not to do to that next
Right. And,
visit.
trust is the number one thing in healthcare. I think, we all understand that. And how important or how big was the network effect from one customer to the other once you guys showed ROI and things like that? What did that look like as well?
So, trust is earned, right? Trust takes time. And I think if you have a really good product, you start with a really good trust foundation. If you say, or if you show some sort of demo and you can't deliver on the goods, then you lose trust right away. And so for us, we always had an advantage because we always showed less than what we could do. Right. And so you want to always over deliver on your promise, not vice versa.
And, and that kind of goes into the concept when you had your first investors. This is a big thing is for early stage right now is I really need funds for EHR integration. I really need funds to deploy my solution into this health system.
Right.
And the big common question is, one is right now is why won't OpenAI do this? Anthropic do this? In your case, back in 2016, obviously it wasn't OpenAI, but there were definitely legacy interoperability solutions. And where do they now fall short compared to what Seekster built overall? And what do you tell investors on that?
I think a couple things. Look, people are going to try tackle this problem of interoperability for a very long time. It's never going to go away, and that's the beauty of it, because it's not like it's just one solution and it just like fixes everything. But you know, back in the day, if we go all the way back to 2011, Microsoft and Google Health tried to do this from their Health Vault days to
Mm,
their Google Health days, and they failed because they were dealing with self reported data and a bunch of other stuff. If we fast forward to today, Anthropic, OpenAI, Gemini, they're all interested in this too, but maybe in a different way. It's not about just, solving that same problem within interoperability. Maybe it's from a different angle. Maybe it's utilizing companies like Seekster, right? That already built the foundation, and then you can plug the AI in a different way. Now, whether you want to use that for direct to consumer and go down that path, or versus using the AI plus data and going down the B2B path, that's a different conversation, right? Those are
mm,
two different paths. And I think from an investment standpoint, investors are definitely interested in this space now. Finally,
right.
it just takes a time, right? It takes a lot of time. I mean, if you think about it, if you just go back, it's kind of like the same thing. If you asked, are investors interested in AI 10 years ago? Not really. But today, if you have a really good AI, company and idea, you're going to get investment, right? Same with, a data company plus AI. You're going to get investment. Investors are investing in this space heavily. And I think there's a ton of cash on the sidelines that hasn't been deployed in this space because people are trying to figure out like exactly where to put it.
Do you think, the launch of, these ChatGPT Health, and now obviously all of these guys are in healthcare now, will kind of be a positive, negative downstream overall in the future as they continue to grow in healthcare? Because obviously they're not going to be staying with just ChatGPT Health and Anthropic Health, whatever. They're going to be kind of going into more, as you mentioned. Do you think this is a big worrisome for early stage founders right now? A mentor for founders right now. What kind of markets do you even see in healthcare that they should be targeting? I mean, you go to back end healthcare, it's completely filled with competitors. I mean, you go to front end, I mean, referral management and health systems, pharma even is very filled. Like, where should founders even go now?
So that's a very tough question. I think if you don't have something built and you're trying to build, it's very difficult, right? Because you don't have a track record, you don't have trust. And, at the end of the day, you need to focus on the customer. You have to be customer centric, not just patient centric. And the companies that are customer centric and patient centric, those are the ones that are going to win. And a lot of companies are going to lose because they think that they can just put an AI wrapper on anything and have a business. That's not going to happen. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs out there are getting excited because it's so easy to spear up certain companies with AI. And that's not a good thing, right? AI should be used to enhance. AI should not be just your company because I think that in itself is going to become commoditized. If not, it already kind of is.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, everyone's using the same AI tech. It's not like you're coming out with some new AI tech. You're either using cloud with Anthropic, you're either using Google with Gemini, you're either using OpenAI with ChatGPT, and they have their advantages and disadvantages. What matters is how much data you have on the back end and what's the quality of data, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
how is that longitudinal data structured? How are you taking unstructured data and structurizing it? How are you harmonizing it? These things open up an avenue of business.
Right. And I think the data moat is still a big, big thing. I mean, obviously
Big
distribution is
thing.
number one in healthcare. Data moat is such a big thing. I mean, overall. I mean, and in your case, you guys just recently launched a kind of like a new product line, the data harmonization engine. Can you walk me through what this does? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. It kind of takes your raw EHRs and then makes it into structured, ready AI records or something like that at scale. Can you kind of talk about what this product line is? Why did you focus on this, and what were customers looking for here?
Yeah, it was kind of, 10 years in the making. We didn't just create it just yesterday. We had to create a very sophisticated parser to parse out data. We created a harmonizer engine where it harmonizes all the data, a standardizer to standardize the data, right? EHR data, medical data in general is very dirty, right? It's like dirty oil, I call it, and you have to refine it in order to make it into pure 100% octane so that, you can put it in an F1 car so that you can drive 0 to 60 in a second. Why is it those cars can go so fast? It's because the fuel is very pure, right? And with data and models, it's the same. I think there's three things. You need to have good, high quality data. You got to use the right model, and then you got to have action, right? I call it DMA, data, models, and action. And if you have those three things, then something like our one-click data refinery plus AI that we launched that you're speaking of a couple weeks ago really resonates to folks that have either a ton of data that they want to harmonize and standardize and use our engine, or they want to utilize our data. And because it is harmonized and standardized, we're able to deliver the goods in a way that it's AI ready, right? And that is really key, I think, for the next decade.
How does it stay accurate though over like, thousands of different systems it has to go through and kind of overall, how does it stay as accurate as possible? Does it get better as people use it in trading purposes or like how does that work?
Well, we built a lot of proprietary technology here that's proprietary to Seekster on the back end, right? And like I said, we've gone through, probably 20 plus EMRs that have been integrated within our system.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of seen everything, right? And everything
Yeah.
is a little bit different. Vitamin, K is characterized in 40 different ways,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Depending on the EMR that you're getting the data from. And so we had to early on create a harmonization engine so that when a patient requests their data and we want to stitch records together to create this longitudinal health record, we had to have a data refinery on the back end from kind of day one. It just got better with our AI
Yeah.
models that we've applied on top of that. And it is to what you're stating, it learns from all the data that we feed it so that it does get better and better and better. And new data points always make the engine a lot better.
What AI models are you guys currently using as the underlying stack?
So we don't share that publicly, but we have not just one, we have multiple.
Do you think that's the kind of the goal and like an end goal over time for most companies? Do you think that, they should be sticking with one model or they should be experimenting with multiple models, or does it kind of just change over time with when the new one comes out, just try to focus on that? Like, what is the brand essence and why kind of focus on multiple or one versus individual?
Well, I don't think you should try to do anything that if it doesn't relate to your business. You have to first peel the onion back and understand what's your business, what are the needs, and how you going to deliver, right? So it's not just could a company just use one model? Sure, it really depends on the use case, right? Could a company use multiple models? Sure, you should if you have multiple use cases like us. I also do think that today we're using the worst technology out there. And why do I say that? Because next year at this time, it's going to be a lot better,
Mhm.
right? So we are actually using the worst technology, the worst AI that's possible today. In a couple months, it's going to be better. Next year, it's going to be, 5x better. In 5 years, it's going to be 100x better. So it's going to be better
Always be better,
all
you
the
know?
time. So you have to be able to adapt to that change and keep up with the speed. I think the speed is very fast.
I mean, a lot of founders now, have another problem. I guess the early stage ones that are coming in that they don't, and especially in healthcare where compliance is a big factor. Compliance and, they don't really aren't very knowledgeable on the regulatory timelines or on the compliant timelines of what they need to sell to health systems or providers, the pharma, whatever it is. How do you guys as Seekster kind of make sure that you guys are hitting these regulatory timelines, keeping it compliant, your products compliant, privacy first, while delivering a depth amount of data to life science companies overall?
I mean, we made a very heavy investment in 2016, 10 years ago, when we started the company for privacy and security. I mean, it was the two core pillars of our company. And, if we didn't do that, I don't think we would be where we are today. Number one, you have to understand that when you're in healthcare, you got to build a HIPAA compliant platform. You got to be SOC 2 certified, got to be 21 CFR Part 11 compliant so that it's FDA approved data, regulatory data that you're delivering. If you're dealing with outside of the US, you got to be GDPR compliant. So all these things we've been since the founding of the company. And those things don't change, but you go through multiple security audits through, with customers. And that's what really, separates you from being a startup to a organization that can deliver for large enterprises.
Yeah. What metric kind of most excites you as proof that Seekster is moving the needle day by day?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say our brand. Our
Why would you
brand is just getting stronger every single day by a multiple that I never imagined.
right.
5 to 10 calls a day for various different interviews. We were just on NBC for the Bay Area when
Love
they
that.
their
Love that.
AI and healthcare segment just a week ago. There's multiple different avenues and inbound coming from a brand standpoint because of the level of expertise our
Yeah.
team has, number one. Number two, the data that we are delivering. And number three, our one-click solutions, whether that be our one-click patient, our one-click records, our one-click data lake, or one-click eligibility that we just launched a couple days ago. All these things, I think, are, coming at a time where data and AI are colliding the same way that healthcare and technology was colliding. And it's happening in real
Yeah.
time.
And how long do you guys ship per month? Like how many features do you guys ship a month and make feedback for your customers as of
Geez,
now?
it's
You
hundreds.
guys still operate like a startup, right? Like you guys just
It's
massively.
always day one at Seekster. Yeah. We will
Yeah.
always be a startup. And the reason being is because, I think startup has two different names. I mean, there's Apple is still a startup, in my opinion, right? And that's
Yeah.
why they're so successful and they have so many amazing products. And yeah, they recycle certain things and they're still acting, their divisions act as a startup. That's why they're leaders in their space, right? And so if you lose the startup mentality, you lose the agility, right? And I
Right.
think we're more of a startup today than even when we started. And that's really the DNA of our success.
Interesting. Can you kind of talk about, how a specific partner of yours, like Takeda, is using the platform now and how, I mean, well, first of all, what were those ROIs that they kind of quickly seen using Seekster? And now how much like time are you kind of cutting for them? What made them continue coming to you guys?
So there's three big things. One, we can deploy Seekster as an operating system for any use case, for any disease in 72 hours, right? With no IT lift. That's huge. Two, we can bring data instantly after it's deployed. So day one, minute one, once we stand up an instance for you, you are receiving data, right? And then number three, we can customize to that specific
Interesting.
enterprise, right? Whether it's a patient registry, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a large healthcare organization, whether it's a payer, whether it's a provider, whether it's a pharma company, a small or medium biotech, all these things, all these entities are very different, but very similar. They all want, high quality data. They want it fast and they want it with a process that doesn't really require an IT lift. And that's where we sit.
Right. You know, did your go to market have to change when you guys got these first, got Takeda and all of these guys? Did it have to change overall to continue, or is it still the same since then?
Say it had to change. I think the customers themselves had to adapt and find new innovative ways. Therefore, the result was our platform getting better, stronger, and faster.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 years from now, how will Seekster change the way clinical trials and RWEs pretty much run across the country?
So I think it's happening right now. I think our data lake of 150 million plus patients is not just a game changer, it is actively changing the game in, real world evidence generation because we're able to layer AI on top of all this data that we have. And that's our biggest differentiator. It's not the fact that we can just pull data from any source for any entity, right? That was really Seekster 1.0. Seekster 2.0, after a decade of experience now in amassing all this data, is layering in the AI
Right.
powered medical record,
I
right?
mean, you brought up a good point though, like where I mean, you guys were not an AI company like we talked about, and now you guys kind of are with the operability of data. How does and as you guys kind of layer AI deeper inside, I guess, for precision medicine, how do you kind of keep the patient at the absolute center, even though it's pretty difficult as AI scales to kind of forget about that core person, how do you guys keep the patient at the
Yeah.
absolute?
We have an incredible onboarding system that we built with pharma, right? Because pharma led our first investments years ago, we were able to work.
Can you talk about what that onboarding system is? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So, let's say you're in a clinical trial
Yeah.
with Pfizer. Our system is the white label that powers that onboarding system where that patient would come through a white label for Pfizer's use case. Let's say they're running some large oncology clinical trial, right? And that patient needs an easy way to connect, collect, and share their data. Seekster is the front end and the back end for that enterprise, for that use case, not just for the patient itself, but also from a research standpoint, right? Where the researcher can look at the consented data through their lens as well. So we have both sides of the business covered. However, it always starts with the patient with us. And if you don't start with the patient, then you can't do all the other stuff.
Yeah, and if someone wanted to fix a broken layer of healthcare, like interoperability, what is like that non-obvious step you would tell them? Like, if I was the founder and I said, "Hey, Artie, I want to get into data interoperability," what is that first step you would tell me to take?
I would tell you do not do it because it's the craziest problem. It is so hard, and I would highly advise in not doing it.
Okay,
It is
but I
very
really
difficult.
want to do it, and I'm passionate. I'm passionate about it. I
So,
really love data influence.
yeah, I would try to, if my advice would be, pick one niche, right? Don't try to do them all. If you want to do it just for provider, pick provider. If you want to do it just for, digital health company, just pick the digital health company. Pick one niche and target that, right? And also, I don't think I would go and create all this stuff. Like I would call Seekster up and partner with Seekster so that you can focus on some other avenue of thing and you wouldn't have to go burn, millions of dollars in building the IT infrastructure. Because companies like ours already exist where we can give you a head start.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That's what I would
Well,
do.
yeah, no, that's for sure. And now, kind of going into a rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So I guess the first one is, when you guys kind of started, what is the moment, patient-centric interoperability became the category winner?
It was my conversations with Seema Verma early on in 2016 when she
Hmm,
was running CMS.
interesting. So what specific, I'm gonna start. So when, you guys were back in 2016 to now we kind of go into 10 years down the road, what will people mostly remember some specific saying that you mentioned about healthcare data and AI, and then, they're gonna be like, okay, he was right about that.
So I ran a tumor board on a Saturday, six different health systems, 69-year-olds, Cologuard results from Exact Sciences, which is now Abbott's, as they purchased them recently, is non-invasive liquid biopsy test from Grail, all connected through various different labs. Tumor board, like I mentioned, on a Saturday in 6 hours, got the individual in surgery, saved this person's life. It was my own father. And
Wow.
that's when I came up with the term health data is medicine. And I actually own the trademark.
Wow, that's so crazy. I mean, so, if you could change one thing about healthcare data that you guys
Yeah.
are not working on right now,
That's crazy.
what would that be?
Uh, bureaucracy.
That's a hard one, though.
Bureaucracy. I mean, that's the holy grail for me because one big reason why health data interoperability isn't solved is because of bureaucracy, because you have a ton of people in the bureaucracy of the hospital setting, in the provider setting that just don't get it. Or if they do get it, they don't want to help.
Right. Yeah, and you work a lot, and, I mean, it happens a lot. Sales cycles are like, what, 18, 32 months overall. Crazy, for this, and you're still going. What keeps you still going?
You
Like,
know,
I mean, I we kinda discussed this a lot, but, like, because you need to love what you're doing. But, like, at one point, you're believe it, as you know, you're gonna have like those super big downs where like, I don't know why I started this. How do you get out of that?
Well, after 10 years, I think it gets a lot easier, number one, because the pain becomes numbness. I think it was painful for the first 4 or 5 years for sure. It was very painful. And then it got a little bit better. And then now, we're just winning, right? We are winning. Seekster is winning. And there's nothing better than to have an opportunity in America to build a business that's going to completely change healthcare, right? I don't want to dent healthcare. I want to change healthcare. Seekster is a technology that I think will be immortal, actually. That's what keeps me going.
Interesting. So how do you balance startup life, your company life, and personal life? If you do.
There's no difference for me. It's all actually one,
Same.
right? And
Yeah.
that takes a skill. That takes time. You have to be able to understand, what life is. You have to be able to take care of your own health. You have to
Yeah.
be able to, go to as many events as possible. You have to be a social, extroverted person. And if you're not, you better become one because that's what it requires. When you're a CEO of a
Oh,
thriving company, if you don't have that DNA, and even if you do, you have to get better at it, right? And so, I'm a student of business. It doesn't matter how young or how old I was when I started the company and how old or how young I feel now today. I feel better today about the next 10 years than I did 10 years ago when I started the company, right? And that's
interesting.
because, again, we're winning, we're helping patients, we're helping dozens of customers.
For sure.
And these are large organizations that have something to do with my health, your health, and your audience's health. And so there's nothing bigger that I think we can be doing.
Absolutely. I mean, two more questions here. If after AI, that's a big tech shift, what do you think will be the next tech shift if you had to guess? I had quantum as an interesting one, but what do you think is like a big tech shift that potentially might come after AI?
That is a very difficult question. If I had to just like think, 10 years down the line, I think robotics is going to come in a way
Yeah,
that's
robotics
non-dimensional.
is huge. I think
Yeah,
physical AI
robotics. You're gonna, and I put robotics as in general, and that's gonna have a lot to do with data. That's gonna have a lot to do with AI. It'll be interesting how robotics actually comes into, healthcare, caregiving, silver tech. There's a lot of opportunity there, I think.
very interesting. Yeah. I mean, I know you're a foodie, you know. If you were in prison for the rest of your life, what is that one meal you're going to be having? I mean, you've
Oh,
tried food everywhere.
everywhere. I'm a foodie techie guy, right? So that's a hard one, but it would definitely be a porterhouse steak.
Wow, that's a class. I mean, it's not classic, but it's like as a foodie, I did not expect that. I thought you were
It
going to
would
say,
be a porterhouse steak. I have to have, my porterhouse steak with some au jus sauce, and I'm good to go.
dude, it's amazing to have you on the show, and I enjoyed this so much. It was a pure joy to have you. So thank you so much. I truly appreciated it.
Thanks so much, Vic, for having me. Amazing to be here and look forward to the next one.